Welcome to the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs Insider Briefing. We hold these briefings to help you, the decision makers, the community leaders, and our professional colleagues make more informed decisions about determinations in the critical issues, Middle East developments across the region. And today is no exception. The question that we're asking today is a question about the Iranian regime in the aftermath of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. There are many concerns, even fears, among the Israeli security echelons and the intelligence agencies about what is next for the Islamic Republic. Very little trust for the regime, and there is a sense that there are many more questions than answers following the regime's receipt of hundreds of millions of dollars, almost reaching into the billions of dollars, in order to fund terrorism and regional supremacy across the Middle East. Well, here to discuss these critical issues at this critical moment in the Middle East and the Iranian regime are two of the country's best experts on the subject, and they are Jerusalem Center senior analysts and researchers. I'd like to introduce Jacques Neriah. Jacques, thanks for joining us. Jacques was the former foreign policy advisor to Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. He's a senior researcher here at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, and Mickey Segall, a former intelligence officer with the intelligence division of the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, and also a distinguished senior researcher here at the Jerusalem Center on the issues of Iran and the Muslim world. Gentlemen, let's jump right into it. Jacques Neriah, help us understand what the professional concerns are, the security concerns, in the aftermath of this agreement between the P5+1 and the Iranian regime. There are deep concerns in the Israeli security echelon.
Okay, let's try to isolate the nuclear issue from the top classical issues of the threat towards Israel. And in this field, we have to stress the fact that we are in presence of Iranians deployed in our northern borders, be it in Lebanon through Hezbollah, and with Hezbollah, the Revolutionary Guards in the Bekaa Valley and in Lebanon as a whole, and then in the Golan, where lately, since the beginning of this year, in fact, the Iranians have tried to deploy the forces, the proxies of theirs, Afghanis and Uzbeks and others, and also accompanied by Hezbollah, they call it Hezbollah Syria, and Iranian officers. So this is the first, I would say, the first threat that is concentrated on our very near borders. The other threat is beyond that, I would say, is beyond our reach, immediate reach. It's in Syria, it's in Iraq, and in the Gulf states, and of course Yemen. So if you look around and you see that the tentacles of this the octopus are being deployed in Syria, I mean the estimate is about a few thousands Iranians who are fighting there. I'm not talking about full brigades which are fully equipped by Iranians and which came from Afghanis who live in Iran, and other mercenaries that are working with the Iranians and together with Hezbollah. And they're in fact the strategic allies of the Assad regime and helping him to stabilize his regime, and maybe right now with the help of the Russians trying to recover some of the terrain that was lost since 2011. So we're talking Syria. In Iraq, the Iranians have taken advantage of the vacuum created by the Americans. And when the Iraqi regime asked the Americans to step up the delivery of weapons, Washington was very slow in answering that, and instead Iranians volunteered and sent planes of their own to Iraq, and there is this famous Badr division which has been trained by Iranians and worked very close to Iran, and they are there waging the war against the Sunnites, against the Islamic State.
I want to pick up, Mickey Segall, on what Jacques Neriah is saying about the Iranian terror octopus extending its tentacles throughout the region on Israel's border, as Jacques says, and way beyond to the second ring countries beyond Israel's borders. From an Iranian point of view, as an former intelligence official, are the Iranian regime leadership looking at the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action and the massive amount of money coming into the regime as a sanction in order to increase their terror presence around the region? I mean, do they feel empowered now? Do they feel indemnified by this agreement?
Yes, I think the Iranians are much more emboldened now. They will try to be more resourceful in the area and enhance their activity under this impunity of the JCPOA. They were, one thing must be said, that they were in this area before, but now they will be more daring, they will be more bold to do things that they haven't done in the past. And indeed, we can see it already. I think it was a month ago when the IRGC and the IRGC naval forces, they kidnapped American sailors just in the time when Obama carried his nation address, State of the Union address. Yeah. As he spoke, the American soldier was crying, as the Iranian TV shows, and I think the Iranian will do it again and again to embarrass the United States, to challenge the United States wherever they are, because Iran wants United States out of the Gulf, out of the Middle East. And I think the void that Jacques referred to a minute ago about the void in Syria, the vacuum that was created by the absence of American foreign policy in the Middle East, I think the Iranians are taking are exploiting this void to enter the area and to enforce and to enhance their already huge presence in this Middle East area.
I would like to stress the point here. I mean, there is nothing new in the fact that Iran is a subversive nation. There's nothing new. The terrorist nation, we have already met with Iranian operatives, with Iranian attacks long ago. But what the situation created today, in fact, justifies, gives a sort of legitimacy to Iran to act in this area. And if you look, if you look closer to what's going on, let's say in the Gulf area, there's not a week that a terrorist cell is not uncovered by the Bahraini, by the Qataris, by the Saudis. I mean, Iran has since the revolution, 79, presented itself as a pan-Islamic ideology, pan-Islamic force. In fact, it was a camouflage Shiite ideology. And today, I mean, with the events in Syria and Iraq, we understand very much that this is the big chaos created by the confrontation between Islamic, by Shia and Sunni. Then the Sunni coalition is led by Iran, whereas the Sunni coalition is led by Saudi Arabia. And this is the clash of two titans. And because of this clash, this is a whole, I mean, the whole area is chaotic. The whole area looks like a magma. You don't know what's happening. You don't know who are your friends and your enemies. And this is because mainly the Iranians were the instigators of the whole development here.
You know, just one question. I want to pick on what both of you have said about this Iranian supremacy in the context of the War of the Titans, as Jacques says, between Sunni leadership under Saudi Arabia, Shia leadership, radical Shia leadership under the Iranian regime. When Mickey talked about the American sailors in the Gulf that were crying with their hands behind their head, this is a classic act of political warfare. What was the mental, psychological effect, in your view, Jacques, as a former special envoy to the Arab world, of that image to the Sunni Arab world?
Let me ask you another question. What was the reaction of America at the time when you had 52 Americans taking hostages from the American embassy? Nada, nothing. So, I mean, you're talking about a country who is very daring and is certain and is self-evident that nothing will happen to it. It's so powerful that the America would not dare do anything without. So today the Marine soldiers that were taken captive by the Iranians. Tomorrow will be something else. You mustn't be surprised. I mean, if a boat is being loaded in Bandar Abbas with weapons sent to Lagos in Nigeria, the only thing that happens is that in the bill of lading, they just missed it. They put Abuja as a port, and everybody knows that Abuja is 500 kilometers inside Nigeria, and there's no port there. They will do whatever they want, as long
they are doing whatever
exactly whatever, and no one is stopping them.
What position, gentlemen, does that place the state of Israel in terms of fighting Iran? Because the war between Iran and Israel has been going on in one way or another since 1979. And here you have Iran's regime, as Jacques Neriah said, encroaching on Israel's borders. Well, they were there since 1982 in southern Lebanon, but today they're in Syria and they're on the Golan Heights, really, literally, with a bird's eye view and reverse into what's happening in Israel. What options does that leave Israel? What is Israel's policy?
Why are you limiting the Iranian presence only to Lebanon and Syria? What about Hamas? What about Hamas in Gaza? What about the relations between Hamas and Iran? What about Iran with the jihadists in Sinai? What about Iran with the jihadists in Egypt and North Africa? And what about Iran in Yemen? So they're everywhere. Israel is under threat. Israel is at war with Iran since a long time. And now we feel that this threat is being closer, because right now they're closer to our borders, closer to our vital points.
Mickey, what do you think?
In this perspective, we should also look into Qasem Soleimani, the man who came in from the shadow. Statements regarding the eastern border.
Let's explain to our viewers who Qasem Soleimani is. He's the commander of the Quds Force,
Iranian special operation outside Iran, the one who is really responsible for Iranian outreach in the Middle East, and he is the bad guy that lately he's becoming more of a overt guy than covert guy. And I think this goes back to your question, Dan, regarding the Iranian future plannings. Iranian in the recent months, especially since the signing of this nuclear agreement, is moving to work more overtly than covertly than it used to do in the past. We can see Iranian are more daring. We can see, for instance, 1 week ago, Iran sent a ship to the shores of Yemen with weapons, with communication equipment, more boldened and more eager to challenge the West, to challenge the weak, as Iran sees, the weak Sunni regimes, and to establish Iran as a regional and even international power. In this point, I think we should look into Khamenei's writings. Khamenei's social media is using this social media very extensively. We can see that he's seeing the recent events in the Middle East, as a divine intervention. And I think Khamenei used this divine intervention during the capture of the American sailors. He used it when Israel pulled out of Lebanon in May 2000, when Saddam Hussein was uncovered and exposed, and when the United States took out the Taliban in Afghanistan. From Iran point of view, being able to confront the West with sanctions, with all the states against Iran, and winning at the end of the day with this nuclear agreement, all of Iranian nuclear capability remains intact. All the know-how is there, and it's just a matter of Iranian decision, of Khamenei and the IRGC top senior commanders' decision that we want to make the bomb. They have the capability, they have the know-how, the knowledge, and it's just a matter of decision. Iran.
Well, I'd like here to stress the point. To make a comparison between what happened in Syria with the chemical weapons and with Iran with the nuclear. The American administration was not eager to wage a war against Syria, and the solution was to disarm Syria from its chemical weapons. In fact, it didn't change the regime. The regime kept on with its policy of destroying itself and destroying Syria, and continuing, I mean, the war they call against the terrorists. Nothing has changed in Syria. The same goes with Iran. The nuclear issue has been evaded, has been dealt with, so-called dealt with, without erasing, in fact, the very essence of the nuclear capacities of Iran. But it has allowed the West to say, we have done something with Iran, and now Iran can do whatever it wants, and this is what's happening.
What about the discussions in the, let's call it, security and intelligence communities in Israel, without obviously revealing anything that can't be revealed? Is there a sense that the Iranian regime is a rational actor or a non-rational actor? That question had been raised in terms of the position by this Netanyahu government, previous governments, to stop Iran's nuclear program and stop them altogether because they thought they would use these weapons if they had them.
No, Iran is not a crazy state. It's not a failed state. It's a state that is governed by logic and by ideology. So this is I would say, the premise of our assessment. I don't think that the Iranians are fools or are crazy people. They're on the contrary. There are people who are very well cultivated. There are people who are well inspired, and they are motivated by their ideology, by Shiite ideology, by a reaction to Sunni supremacy in the area. And as I said, I mean, this is today is the matching point between Sunnah and Shia. And in this context, Israel finds itself with the Sunnah. With the Sunni royalties in kingdoms in Saudi Arabia, and with the Sunni regimes in North Africa and Egypt, and this is where we stand today, facing the Iranians. Iran has always acted according to a logic. I mean, according to this logic, it's very easy to understand what they say. And whatever they say, they mean. And this is, I mean, this is for us as officers, of intelligent officers. I think that this is our premise, that when they say something, they mean it. And if they mean it, we have to take it into account.
How much of a favor, here's a provocative question for both of you, has Iran done Israel a certain favor by increasing its leverage among the Arab Sunni states, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and the Gulf states, to a much greater degree than Israel's leverage had been empowered before?
You are facing today a situation where you might have an armed clash, military clash between Iran and Saudi Arabia. I mean, Saudi Arabia yesterday again took 32 so-called terrorists, most of them Shiites, and is going to try them. And they will be hanged, like the previous 47 that were hanged a month ago. And Iran is not ready to accept that. Iran is still asking questions about the 1,000 pilgrims, Iranian pilgrims, with some of them very high-ranking officials who have disappeared in
Syria,
in Saudi Arabia, during the pilgrimage. So, and Iran is stepping up the threat to Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia is feeling the crunch of it, and they are looking around to see who can assist. Because with the non-presence of America, the Saudis feel a little bit unsecure, and in this realm, I think that we have something to say together with the Saudis.
What does Israel have to say with the Saudis, Mickey Segall?
Just to add, I think today Iran and Saudi Arabia also are already conducting a war. It's a proxy war, but it's conducted between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Indeed, in Yemen, for instance, last week 3 Iranians were killed along the Yemenite-Saudi border. It was the first time since in this conflict that Iranians are being killed. And indeed, the Houthi, which are pro-Iranian in Yemen, they fired on a daily basis rockets and missiles at Saudi Arabia towns in southern Saudi Arabia, and indeed they conduct cyber war against Aramco oil installation. They fired missiles against Aramco Saudi oil installation along the border, and I think there is a war. If we can look on Yemen and Syria, of kind of a microcosmos of the war between Iran and Saudi Arabia, this is the case, because we see in Yemen, we can see Sudanese forces, UAE forces fighting along Saudis in the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen against Iranians and the Houthi Shiite rebels in Yemen. The same in Syria, which no one knows exactly the extent of Saudi Arabia support of many Sunni forces in this arena. But for Israel, it's an opportunity, because now we can get closer to Persian Gulf states with some kind of cooperation, because they really fear Iran. They fear Iran subversion in eastern Saudi Arabia and oil-rich East Saudi Arabia. They fear Iran intervention in Bahrain, which Iran considered as its 14th province. And I think what they fear the most is, in the Western eye view, Iran is becoming part of the solution to Middle Eastern problem and not part of the problem anymore. And I think this is why the Saudis are so afraid. They fear the future, and I think.
And they are angered also by the fact that
the Americans have legitimized an Iranian.
They have invited the Iranians to Geneva. I mean, Iran is part and parcel of every solution in Syria. This is unacceptable for the Saudis.
In the Sunni world, United States literally abandoned. They abandoned Mubarak at the very first day of the so-called Arab Spring in Tahrir Square revolution. They abandoned the Saudi Arabians when they signed or agreed upon the JCPOA, and actually they feel alone. They feel that the void that America left a huge void, a huge vacuum in the Middle East, and no one feels this view but Iran and Russia.
And there's one other elephant in the room, and that is what we call Daesh, the ISIS phenomenon, which is neither in the Saudi umbrella, nor is it under the Iranian completely umbrella, even though there are many who understand that the Iranian regime actually in some way founded ISIS, even though they're also fighting against ISIS. Help us understand the ISIS phenomenon and the loyalties of even moderate Sunnis who are sometimes backing ISIS against Iran, but then that also backfires against the same so-called moderate Sunni forces.
Maybe I'm going to say something that is unaccepted yet, but I mean Daesh is the son, the illegitimate or legitimate son of the U.S. administration, because of
Afghanistan? Beginning in Afghanistan?
No, because of the policy in Iraq in 2003, by destroying the Iraqi army, by
Debassification.
Yes,
Deba'thification.
and Mr. Bremen, who said that we have to restore democracy, and true democracy is by putting Shiites to rule in Iraq, whereas they were all the time ruled by the Sunnites. And by the very fact that 400,000 soldiers and officers found themselves without any pension, out of jobs, and so they joined Daesh. Under different names. So this is not a creation of Iran, certainly not. If you look at the map, and you see that, in fact, the Daesh is the reproduction of Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was the bastion that was stopping Iran. He was stopping Iran from further trying to penetrate the Middle East. Daesh is the same. Daesh its ideology is a buffer zone, but this buffer zone has something of a cancer, because it's not it wants to grow and to eat Syria, because it's a Shiite regime. It's Alawites who are ruling the Syria, so they want to take it over. And the same, they're looking at Saudi Arabia, for instance, as the big heretics. This is an illegitimate regime that has to be destroyed. And most of the activities that are carried today in Saudi Arabia in terrorism are cells that are teleguided by Daesh. So Daesh has a twofold hat. One hat is against the Sunnite moderate regimes because their Islam is unacceptable to Daesh, to Mr. Baghdadi, to the Caliph, and on the other hand, to try to stop the intrusion of Shiite supremacy in Syria and other places. And this is why they are very active in Syria, in Iraq. Most of the activities, the terrorist acts, are carried out by Daesh in Iraq, and in Yemen and Saudi Arabia, all the same.
To what extent does Daesh consider Israel to be the near enemy or the far enemy?
Well, you know, Daesh, in its ideology, if you read the Diker magazine, the famous magazine, they say that according to Islamic, the Muslim eschatology, this is what they deal, Ibn Taymiyyah and all the rest, they say that the battle between the West, the Christianity and the Christendom and Islam will be carried in Diker. Diker, it's the place where most of the hostages were being beheaded, I mean, on TV. But this battle will happen after Jerusalem will be destroyed. So this is in their basic ideology, the fact that Israel should not exist. We should fight Israel as much as we can. And the fact is, today we have already cells inside Israel that have been uncovered by our Secret Service.
Meaning moving around Palestinian Israelis or Arab Israelis?
Arab Israelis, yes. Arab Israelis already in the Bedouin area of Rahat, in the northern part of the Baqar al-Gharbiyah. You can go there, and if you go and visit, you'll see flags of Daesh already there.
Are they investing lots of money into these communities in order to
We don't
win?
need to invest a lot of money to do that. You do that on the net, social media, and all those young kids who carry knives and go, and they are inspired only by what's happening in Raqqa. Raqqa, the capital of Daesh. They are not inspired by Hamas. They are not inspired by Fatah. They are not inspired by Jihad. They are inspired by what's happening there. This is the shockwave coming to us from Daesh.
How does this affect Israeli military defense policy, national security policy, this whole very chaotic state of affairs that we're discussing here? Are we talking about a red line security policy? I know that Israel has basically determined that its foreign policy is, certainly in the Middle East, is a red line security policy. It's bombed, according to foreign reports, it's bombed Syria probably 10 or 12 times in the last year and a half, 2 years.
Look, the Israeli army has done some work about the threat around us, and they have determined who are, the order of priority. We should not forget that today our priority is Iran. Iran, we should not forget that. In any context of a Syrian, I would say, a Syrian regime solution, the Iranians will be present. They are present already in Damascus, and they'll be present in the Golan. So we have to deal with that issue very, very seriously. This is what. The other issue of Daesh, right now they are very far from us, but in fact they are already very close to us. They are living among us, and what is most alarming with Daesh is the fact that they have in their possession chemical weapons. Only 2 weeks ago there was a big alert in Iraq because some radioactive active material was lost, and it was found later. But the fear that something of this sort falls into the hands of Daesh, then this is something that can be of a great danger to us.
You know, it's extraordinary, Mickey. I want to hear your view on what Jacques is saying here. One thing that one notices from Jerusalem is that the Palestinian issue is not mentioned almost at all by the radical, the Salafist Sunni players, by the Iranian regime. They use it, but on the whole, you really see it quite quiet when they refer to the region.
There's an earthquake. The lava is coming out from the earth, and is running all around. And we're talking about tectonic moves between Shiite and Sunnite. What is the Palestinian issue today? Nothing. It's compared to what's happening in the Middle East is nothing. And the fact that all the time they used to accuse Israel that because of the Palestinian that there's no peace there. This is totally incorrect. Look at the situation today in the Middle East. There's war, and Israel is not part of it. There's war between Shia and Sunni. Syria is dismembered. Iraq is divided. Libya does not exist. And who is the force who's surging at the dark force? Okay, like in the movie, it's the Daesh is there. This is the real issue. It's not the Palestinian issue. This is the issue today, because this issue is threatening at 1 hour flight time. It's threatening Rome. It's threatening Italy. It's threatening Spain. It's threatening the whole of Europe. And we have seen that on the 13th of November, all those terrorists were trained where in our area, and they were sent there. And part of the refugees, part of the migrants that were there are members that were infiltrated by Daesh themselves. And Daesh also declared very openly, we will introduce more than 500,000 terrorists inside Europe. This is the danger, not the Palestinian issue.
Mickey?
I think that the whole landscape of the Middle East is changing, and the tectonic plates are moving, and I think the Palestinian issue is falling in between these plates. And what we can see now, that the shock waves of this tectonic the shift of tectonic plates, I think it's reaching Europe. And I think some call them refugees, and some call them refugees, as in Sweden and in other places, that are now feeling this shock wave. And the Palestinian issue is really cornered. Nobody is talking anymore about there are some, maybe in the European Union, that are still holding this case of a two-state solution. But I think the magnitude of the change is so big because we are living in the eye of the storm, and we are living in a meta-historic moment in the Middle East. It redefines the Middle East, redefines Middle East equations, redefines Middle East landscape. And in this case, I think the Palestinian somewhere disappeared in this tremendous change.
So when your house is burning, you don't spray water on the outside your house. You just first have to fight the fire.
So as we've heard, the Middle East is a firestorm, and Israel's got all the sprinklers on. It's an island of tranquility, stability, and democracy in the middle of an earthquake that is consuming the entire region. Thanks for watching this edition of JCPA's Insider Briefing. We look forward to seeing you again real soon.